I'm Nicole Thompson, 28, the youngest in my family. Ever since I got the call about a family meeting in Pine Valley, California, I've been bracing myself like a storm's on the horizon. My sister's voice still echoes from our last conversation. You can't even afford a real car. She laughed, her tone sharp as glass.
The whole family buys that story that I'm some broke dreamer scraping by on odd freelance jobs too stubborn to admit I've failed. I'm still living simply because their idea of success SUVs, designer watches, country club memberships has never meant a thing to me. But their smug pity, especially my sister's, cuts deeper than I'd like to admit. It's not just the words, it's years of being written off as the screw-up who'd never amount to anything. Now they've called this meeting because Mom's hip is busted, Dad's memory is slipping, and I know they expect me to toss in pennies while they play the big shots. I'm on a commercial flight clutching my worn backpack, fully aware that when I walk into that room, it'll be all side-eye glances and fake concern. Inside, I'm torn. Part of me wants to keep my secret and avoid the drama. The other part, it's ready to turn the table so fast they won't see it coming. And yes, I've prepared something that will silence the entire dinner table.
Before I dive into what happened next, I want to know what time is it where you are and which city are you reading from. Stay with me. You're not going to believe what's coming.
Being the youngest in our family in Pine Valley, California, meant I was always the oddball in a town obsessed with vineyards, wine tastings, and the kind of success that shows up in a shiny new pickup or a gated estate. My older brother Brandon, now 38, was the poster child for that life. He was the high school baseball star who could have gone pro, but instead went to UCLA, married into a family that owns half the valley's wineries, and now lives in a mansion with a view of the rolling hills. He's the guy who closes real estate deals over golf at the country club, always bragging about his latest $1 million commission, like it's nothing. My sister Kimberly, 32, was the middle kid, the one who ran the show as student council president, organized local wine festival fundraisers, and turned that charm into a marketing director gig at a big LA firm. She's got the Instagram perfect life, designer dresses, charity galas at Napa resorts, and a condo with floor-to-ceiling windows. Mom and Dad tried to treat us equal, but it was obvious they saw Brandon and Kimberly as the ones who made it. The kids who followed the script of good degrees, marriage, and a mortgage on a house with a vineyard view. Me, I was the weirdo coding apps in my bedroom while they were sipping Cabernet at family tastings, dreaming up ways to help local farms cut their carbon footprint with tech. They called it a hobby, something I'd grow out of once I got serious about college, or settled down like Kimberly. When I told them at 18 I was ditching college to start my own company, the dinner table went silent like I'd just cursed out loud. Dad stared at his plate, muttering, "You're throwing your life away, Nicole. This isn't how we do things." Mom fretted about security, saying, "Why can't you be practical like your brother, or find someone stable like your sister Brandon?" Smirked and said, "Come on, sis. Startups are for Silicon Valley wannabes. Get a real job." Kimberly just sighed, whispering later, "Don't make us look bad, okay?" That rejection burned, but the real knife came at a family wine festival that summer right after graduation. Flashback to me, standing by the tasting tents, nervous but excited, sharing my idea for an app that tracks carbon emissions for small businesses, thinking they'd finally get it. Brandon nodded, took notes. And a few months later, I found out through a winery contact he'd pitched my concept at his firm's board meeting, claiming it was his own, and landed a fat promotion with a bonus check for innovation. It felt like a punch to the gut. My own brother stealing from me, and I stayed quiet, thinking family meant swallowing the hurt. Then Kimberly made it worse, spreading rumors to her wine club friends and our cousins that I was unstable for skipping college. "Nicole's just chasing dreams that'll crash," she'd say. It got me uninvited to family weddings, cut off from local business contacts who could have backed my early projects. One night after hearing her rumors at a diner, I called her up, voice shaking, and she brushed me off with, "Grow up, Nicole, nobody trusts a dropout." That betrayal, Brandon's theft, Kimberly's sabotage, twisted my hurt into something tougher like a wall I built to keep them out. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was resilience laced with their jealousy I could feel under their jabs like they knew my ideas threatened their perfect lives. I left Pine Valley with $300 from waitressing at a local tap room dead set on proving them wrong. They bet I'd be back in months broke and begging for a job at Brandon's firm or a spot helping Kimberly's galas. When I didn't, they spun a story I was barely surviving in some sketchy LA apartment chasing dead-end dreams. Truth was, I hit rock bottom. My first startup tanked after a shady partner left me $10,000 in debt. Second one folded when investors bailed during a tech slump, leaving me couch surfing and eating dollar store noodles for weeks. Those failures echoed their doubts, stung hard, reigniting that old hurt but flipped it into grit. I worked 18-hour days coding in coffee shops until I nailed a carbon tracking patent that changed the game for eco-focused businesses. 3 years of sweat paid off when my company EcoGuard caught fire signing deals with California wineries going green and got bought out for $40 million 6 months ago. I kept my leadership role and a chunk of equity, but never told my family. On holiday calls, they'd assume I was struggling. Brandon offering me a low-level job at his firm to get you on your feet, Kimberly mailing old clothes with notes like, "For your interviews, sis." I'd nod, say thanks, and move on, but inside their words fueled a new edge. That resilience now had a bitter twist of their jealousy, like they sensed my wins and hated it. Keeping my success secret was my shield. Let them underestimate me, show their true colors without me having to justify a thing. It freed me to focus on what mattered, like funding clean water projects in rural areas instead of buying flashy cars or estates. But those betrayals, Brandon's stolen idea, Kimberly's rumors, made my success feel defiant, almost like a quiet middle finger to their world. That wall of secrecy held strong, kept me safe from more sabotage, but it left me isolated too. When the call about Mom and Dad's health came 3 weeks ago, that wall started to crack, pulling me back into the family mess I'd fought so hard to escape. When the call came 3 weeks ago from Brandon about Mom's broken hip and Dad's dementia progressing faster than expected, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten like a vine wrapping around a trellis. He laid it out in his usual bossy tone, saying we needed to discuss care options and how we'd split the costs, adding with that patronizing edge, "If you can make it back and contribute what you can, that'd be great." I didn't argue, just booked a commercial flight from LA to the small airport near Pine Valley, telling myself this was the time to face them without the mask. On the plane, I stared out the window, ignoring the in-flight wine list that reminded me of home's vineyard culture, and pulled on my faded jeans, a plain sweater with a tiny rip at the sleeve, and old sneakers that had seen better days. My assistant Brittany watched me pack the night before, shaking her head as I stuffed everything into a beat-up backpack instead of my usual suitcase. "You're sitting on $40 million and dressing like a college kid heading home for break," she said, handing me the itinerary. I shrugged, tucking my hair into a ponytail. That's how they see me, and I'm not ready to change that yet. The flight gave me time to think about why I kept up the act. In business, being underestimated meant people let their guard down, handing me advantages and deals, but with family it meant no pressure to measure up to their standards. Deeper though it was, protection from the pain their betrayal caused, like when Brandon stole my idea, or Kimberly spread those rumors, turning family gatherings into minefields. As the plane landed, I gripped my backpack tighter, undecided if I'd reveal everything or keep playing the struggling youngest sister. The taxi ride through the valley's winding roads lined with grapevines brought back flashes of childhood, but I pushed them aside, focusing on the meeting ahead. When the cab pulled up to our family home, a cozy ranch-style house with a small vineyard in the back, Brandon was waiting on the porch in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, checking his watch, like I was late for a board meeting. "Finally," he said, without a hug, eyeing my outfit and backpack with a smirk. "Flight delayed, or did you hitchhike from the airport?" I forced a smile, stepping inside. Good to see you too. Brandon, the flight was fine. How are Mom and Dad? He took my bag, his face mixing pity and superiority as he noted its frayed straps. As good as can be, I've been here since yesterday setting things up. Kimberly arrives soon. You're in your old room. Nothing's changed. As I followed him in, he added casually, "If you need help with travel costs or anything while you're here, just say the word. I know. Time off isn't easy financially for you." That first jab landed like expected, but I nodded thanks, keeping my cool. Dad was napping in his recliner, looking frailer, with more gray in his hair. Mom was in the kitchen, moving slow from her surgery, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Nicole, honey," she said, hugging me carefully. "You look tired. Are you eating okay on your budget? Call if you need grocery money." I helped her to a chair, assuring her I was fine, and asked about her physical therapy. Brandon hovered, interrupting with doctor terms he'd researched, pulling out a binder of care options with cost breakdowns and ratings. "We'll go through it all tomorrow," he said, closing it with emphasis on the prices, a reminder of what he thought I could afford. I nodded, knowing my bank account had enough to cover everything 10 times over, but tonight wasn't the time. Mom insisted on making dinner despite her mobility, so I offered to help. But Brandon had ordered in from a fancy winery cafe: roast chicken, herb potatoes, fresh salads, and artisan bread that Mom fussed over. "This must cost a fortune," she said, arranging it on her good plates. "Brandon, you're so generous." He waved it off with false modesty. "No big deal. The firm had a good quarter, and family moments like this are worth it." The doorbell rang and Kimberly swept in with her usual flair, carrying designer bags, her hair perfect in a blowout despite travel. She hugged Mom gently, then distributed gifts: a bottle of rare Cabernet for Dad, a cashmere scarf for Mom, a leather wallet for Brandon. When she got to me, her smile faltered. "And for you, Nicole? I figured you'd like this." She handed me a gift card to a budget clothing store, explaining, "Your wardrobe seemed dated last visit. This should help with professional pieces for job hunting." I pocketed it evenly, ignoring the dig about employment. "Thanks, Kimberly, thoughtful as always." She patted my arm. "We all want you to succeed. Speaking of which, my firm just landed a huge client, renovating the office with valley views." Dinner talk revolved around their wins: Brandon's big promotion, Kimberly's gala that raised thousands for local arts, her husband's golf tournament at the winery club. When it turned to me, it was all concern. "What about you, Nicole?" Kimberly asked, sipping wine. "Any news on your projects?" I replied vaguely, "Small business stuff, freelancing mostly." Brandon cut in. "I know folks who need basic app work, nothing fancy but steady pay, better than gigs." I swallowed the urge to mention my gigs sold for $40 million, thanking him instead. Dad stirred, asking, "Still in that cramped apartment with loud neighbors?" "That was 5 years and 2 homes ago. I own a loft with ocean views now, but they didn't need to know yet." "It's comfortable, Dad." Kimberly laughed. Comfort's relative. Remember when Nicole thought success was affording brand name wine instead of box stuff? Everyone chuckled at my simplicity, and the talk shifted to parents' care needs. Brandon went executive mode, saying, "Reality is Mom and Dad need more than Medicare covers. Their savings aren't infinite for the quality they deserve." Kimberly added, "We've scouted exclusive facilities near us with wine tasting socials and top medical care." Throughout they used "we," excluding me, their glances saying I was the youngest who couldn't contribute much. "Premium costs, of course," Brandon said, eyeing me, "but Kimberly and I can handle most, to be fair by means." Kimberly nodded sweetly. "Everyone gives what they can. We don't expect you to match us. Even a small amount helps." My cheeks burned, not from inability, but from them writing me off without asking, years of assumptions piling up. Mom sighed, patting my hand. "You've got potential, Nicole. I don't know why you didn't finish that degree. You could be successful like your brother." "Different paths, Mom," I said quietly. "Not everyone defines success the same." Brandon nodded condescendingly. True, but some definitions are more practical. Security, family care, those are real markers. The digs kept coming subtle but steady, and I held my composure, debating my next move. Then a short flashback hit me from 2 years ago when Dad's first dementia signs showed. I'd secretly wired anonymous donations to their account for doctor visits, pretending it was insurance refunds. One time I overheard Mom thanking the bank error on the phone, while I sat silent at dinner knowing it was me covering thousands in bills. That memory fueled my rising resentment, twisting into a boiling point but with a new layer, anticipation for the reveal, like a cork about to pop on a vintage bottle. By dessert, I decided tomorrow's meeting would be when they learned the truth, but for now the tension simmered, building to a boil. The family meeting kicked off at 9 sharp in the living room of our Pine Valley home, the morning light filtering through windows overlooking Mom's small vineyard. Brandon stood at the front like a CEO in his pressed polo and slacks his laptop hooked to a projector, flashing a PowerPoint titled Parental Care Options and Costs. Mom and Dad sat in their usual armchairs, Mom wincing from her hip pain, Dad staring blankly, struggling to follow. Kimberly perched on the couch, her designer skirt and blouse screaming LA, scrolling her phone between slides. I took the wobbly stool in the corner, the spot they always left for the youngest, feeling their eyes skim over me like I was barely there. Brandon clicked through slides of upscale care facilities, manicured grounds, wine-tasting socials, memory care programs, for Dad gourmet dining with valley views. These are the top options for quality medical care and social engagement, he said, his voice all business. This one's our pick, a new community with private suites, walking paths, even a vineyard tour program for residents. The costs flashed on the screen, thousands monthly, and Mom gasped softly, gripping Dad's hand. That's steep, she murmured. Brandon nodded, flipping to a budget slide. Their retirement savings won't cover it long term, so we're splitting the gap as a family. He glanced at me, his tone heavy with assumption. Kimberly and I can handle 60% each, taking 30, which leaves 10%, about $800 monthly for you, Nicole, if that's doable. Kimberly chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. We know your situation's tight, so if 800's too much, maybe you could pitch in with visits or something. Nobody expects you to match us. Their words landed like a slap, assuming I was too broke to contribute, never asking what I could actually do. I stayed quiet, letting their narrative play out, curious how far they'd push it. Before I could respond, I needed a moment alone and slipped to the hallway to grab water. That's when I overheard them, Brandon and Kimberly, whispering in the kitchen, their voices low but clear. She'll have to pay whatever we say, Brandon said, a smug edge in his tone. Where else can the failure go? She's got no real job? No options? Kimberly giggled softly. Exactly. Let's set her share low, so she feels useful, but we control the rest. My blood ran cold, their plan to exploit me as the useless youngest hitting like a betrayal stacked on top of their past ones. I clenched my fists, heart pounding, and returned to the living room, face neutral. Brandon wrapped up his presentation, emphasizing the costs again. Premium care isn't cheap, but it's what they deserve. Kimberly nodded, leaning forward. Nicole, we're just being practical. You can't even afford a car, right? That taxi you rolled up in yesterday looked rough. Mom, trying to soften it, added, It's just junk. Dear, you deserve better than that old thing you drive. The room erupted in laughter. Brandon's deep chuckle, Kimberly's high-pitched giggle, even Dad's confused smile joining in. Their mockery lit a fuse inside me, the years of their assumptions, and now this calculated plan to squeeze me dry, snapping something loose. I smirked, pulling out my phone, and dialed Brittany, my assistant, keeping my voice steady. Hey, it's me. Come pick me up now. I paused, listening to her confirm. Yeah. 5 minutes is perfect, front yard's clear. I hung up, ignoring Brandon's annoyed huff. This isn't the time for calls, Nicole. We're discussing serious family business. I leaned back on my stool, calm as ever. Just sorting my ride, don't worry. Kimberly raised an eyebrow, laughing. Another taxi. You really need to get a car one day. I just smiled, letting their smugness hang in the air. 5 minutes later, the unmistakable roar of helicopter blades cut through the morning quiet, growing louder until it was impossible to ignore. Mom peered out the window, her eyes wide. What in the world? Dad shuffled to her side, squinting. Kimberly stood, her phone slipping to the couch. "Is that allowed here?" she stammered. I gathered my backpack, standing up. "No need to call anyone, that's for me." Their faces froze. Brandon's jaw tight, Mom's hand clutching Dad's. Kimberly's eyes darting to the window. The sleek black helicopter settled onto the front lawn, its rotors bending the grass, shaking the vineyard trellises. My pilot Ryan gave a quick wave from the cockpit, his uniform crisp. I walked to the door, turning back to their stunned stares. "My ride's here," I said simply, opening the door as the engines idled. Kimberly's face went pale, her knees buckling, and she crumpled to the couch, in a faint, her designer skirt fanning out. Mom gasped, fanning her with a magazine while Brandon stood rooted, his usual confidence cracked. Dad just stared, muttering Nicole like he was seeing me for the first time. I stepped outside the helicopter's roar, drowning their whispers, and gestured for them to follow. "Come on, we're not done yet. Let's take this somewhere else." They hesitated, but the sheer shock pulled them out, stumbling toward the chopper like they had no choice. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of flipping their world upside down, knowing they were about to see the truth they'd never imagined. The helicopter's roar filled the air as we lifted off from Pine Valley, my family strapped in, faces pale from shock. Kimberly still shaky from fainting, Brandon gripping the seat like he could control it. Mom and Dad staring out the window, wide-eyed. Ryan, my pilot, gave me a quick nod through his headset, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to my faded jeans. We banked toward the 20-acre ranch I'd bought 6 months ago just outside LA, a sprawling spread with rolling fields, a modern farmhouse, and a private helipad tucked behind a grove of oaks. As we landed, the dust swirled, and I caught their stunned glances at the property stretching out before us. "Welcome to my place," I said, stepping out, leading them toward the farmhouse where Brittany, my assistant, waited with a tablet and a professional smile. Brandon recovered, first his voice sharp. "What the hell is this?" "Nicole." I gestured to the sleek living room with its open windows and vineyard-inspired decor, motioning for them to sit on leather couches around an oak coffee table. "This is home, my company's regional base." Kimberly, clutching her purse, snapped. "Your company." "Since when do you have a company?" I sat down, calm as ever. EcoGuard, my environmental startup founded 8 years ago. We built a carbon tracking app for businesses, sold it for $40 million 6 months ago. I kept my role and equity. The silence was deafening. Mom's jaw dropped. Dad blinked slowly. Brandon's face went red. "40 million, Dad muttered like he was testing the words. "My Nicole." I nodded, turning to Brittany, who handed me a folder. "That's not all. I set up the Westbrook Foundation. It runs a care community for memory patients like Dad. Mom and Dad's spots are already secured, fully funded." Kimberly's eyes narrowed. "You're saying you've been sitting on millions and never told us why?" I leaned forward, voice steady. "Because you never asked. You assumed I was a failure." Brandon, with his "get a real job," jabs you with your rumors about me being unstable. Every holiday call, every visit, you wrote me off as the broke youngest who'd never make it. Brandon scoffed. "You let us think you were struggling. Don't pin this on us." I opened the folder, sliding out documents. "There's more. Brandon, your big promotion. The one you got pitching my app idea as your own. It's crumbling. Your firm's in debt because you've been living beyond your means, maxing credit to keep up that winery mansion lifestyle." His face froze, eyes darting to Kimberly, who gasped. "How do you know that?" he stammered. "I have contacts," I said simply. "And one last thing, I've been paying Mom and Dad's medical bills for 2 years, anonymous donations through their account. Every insurance refund you thanked was me thousands to keep them stable." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "That was you," she whispered. Dad looked at me clearer than I'd seen him in months. You did that for us? I nodded, feeling the weight of their stares. I cared even when you didn't see me. Kimberly's face twisted, torn between shock and something darker. So what, you're flaunting this to make us look bad? Showing off your money to rub it in? Her voice cracked, revealing a raw edge. My life's not perfect either. My marriage is a mess. The galas feel empty, but I don't hide behind some secret empire to prove a point. Brandon jumped in, his tone defensive. You could have told us, Nicole. Instead, you play this game letting us look like fools. My firm's fine, and that idea wasn't just yours, I built on it. I shook my head. You stole it, Brandon. And Kimberly, you spread lies that cost me contacts, family, years of trust. I hid because every time I tried to share, you shut me down, called my work a hobby, my dreams flaky. Mom tried to intervene. Nicole, we didn't mean to hurt you. I cut her off gently. You didn't ask either, Mom. You all decided I was the failure and ran with it. The air grew thick, accusations flying. Kimberly's voice rose. You're just selfish, keeping this from us to play the hero now. Brandon added, you think you're better than us because you got lucky with some app. Their words stung, but the Genti in their eyes, jealousy of my quiet success, burned brighter, a twist on the resentment I'd felt for years. They weren't sorry, just mad they'd been wrong. Tyler, my chef, brought in lunch. Winery-style plates of grilled salmon, herb salads, artisan bread, his eyes wide as he caught the tension, a silent witness to the drama. Brittany stood by, ready with more documents if needed. The table was set, but no one touched the food, the room crackling with unresolved anger. I looked at them, Brandon's clenched fists, Kimberly's trembling lips, Mom and Dad's confused faces, and realized this wasn't going anywhere. Their accusations weren't about understanding me. They were about protecting their own egos. The fight peaked, voices overlapping, no resolution in sight, and I knew what I had to do next. The air in the ranch's living room hung heavy, the untouched lunch, grilled salmon, herb salads, artisan bread sitting cold on the oak table as accusations bounced between us. Brandon's fists stayed clenched, his voice sharp. You're twisting this, Nicole, making us the bad guys to feel better about your sneaky millions. Kimberly's lips trembled, her eyes flashing with that same tie I'd seen before. You hid all this to play the victim, didn't you? Acting broke while we worried? Mom tried again, softer. We didn't know, honey, we thought you needed help. Dad just watched, his clarity fading, muttering, Nicole's done good. I looked at them. Their words a mix of denial and anger. No trace of real regret. Brandon doubled down, his tone manipulative. My firm's not in trouble, you're throwing dirt to look superior. And that app idea I made, it worked, not you. Kimberly jumped in, voice shrill. My marriage isn't perfect, sure, but I don't need your pity or your secret charity to feel okay. Their defensiveness wasn't new. It was the same old pattern, protecting their egos instead of facing the truth. I'd hoped for a crack, some hint they'd see me differently, but their accusations only proved they'd never change. I stood up, voice calm but firm. I didn't come here to play hero or victim. I came for Mom and Dad. You've made it clear you don't care who I really am, only how my success makes you look. Brittany handed me another folder, this one with legal papers. The Westbrook Foundation has a trust set up for Mom and Dad, full care, medical, everything, no cost to them or you. It's done, no input needed. Mom's eyes widened. You're doing all that? I nodded. I've been doing it. You don't need to worry. Brandon's face twisted. So you're cutting us out, typical Nicole, always the outsider. Kimberly scoffed. You think you're above us now, throwing money at problems. Their words didn't sting anymore. They just confirmed what I already knew. I turned to Brittany. Get the chopper ready, I'm heading back. She nodded, stepping out to call Ryan. Tyler, the chef, lingered by the door, his wide eyes catching the fallout as he cleared the plates. I faced my family one last time. I'm done trying to prove myself to you. You've got your lives, Your assumptions keep them. I'm not part of this anymore. Kimberly's voice cracked. You're just walking away. After all this, I met her gaze. Yeah, Kimberly, I am. Good luck with your galas. Brandon snorted. You'll regret this when you need us. I didn't reply, just walked out to the helipad where Ryan had the helicopter spinning up. As we lifted off, I saw them standing in the doorway, Brandon fuming, Kimberly clutching her purse. Mom and Dad confused, but silent. The ranch shrank below LA's skyline coming into view, and a weight lifted off my chest. Back in the city, I blocked their numbers, set up the trust to handle Mom and Dad's care without my direct involvement, and let Brittany handle the rest. The consequences hit fast. Brandon's firm got a tip from my contacts about his debt, sparking an internal audit that tanked his golden boy status. Kimberly's rumors about me backfired when winery friends learned the truth, leaving her social circle whispering about her instead. I didn't care to watch it unfold. I was done. Sitting in my loft, looking out at the ocean, I felt lighter than I had in years. This whole mess showed me self-respect beats. Family approval, every time cutting out those who drag you down opens doors to real support. I'd spent years chasing their validation, letting their betrayal define me, but no more. My success my way was enough. Don't stick around for validation from judges. Build ties that lift you up. Instead, people who see you for you, not their version of you. Thanks for hearing my side. Subscribe for more family drama stories. Comment if you've ever cut toxic ties, too. I'd love to hear your story.
You're too uptight to understand adult relationships, Philip sneered, his voice dripping with condescension as he leaned back in his leather chair. Maybe you should find a church job instead. I stood there in his corner office in Portland, Oregon, clutching the termination letter he'd just handed me, my face burning with humiliation and rage. The injustice of it all made my hands shake. I had worked at Velric Consulting for nearly 10 years, building my reputation as one of the most trusted senior analysts in the firm. I had helped Philip Barrett climb the corporate ladder, covered for his mistakes, and made him look good in front of clients countless times. And this was how he repaid my loyalty. My name is Jenna McAllister, and I'm 34 years old. For the past decade, I've been the backbone of operations at one of Portland's most prestigious consulting firms. I specialized in financial strategy and client relations, and I was damn good at my job. My colleagues respected me, clients trusted me, and I had built something I was genuinely proud of. Or at least I thought I had. The morning had started like any other Wednesday in October. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., reviewed the quarterly reports, and prepared for our weekly client strategy meeting. Everything seemed normal, until Philip called me into his office with that familiar smirk that always meant trouble. I should have known something was coming when he closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit down. Jenna, we need to discuss your future here, he had said, his tone suddenly formal and cold. I felt my stomach drop. Is there a problem with my work? It's not about your work performance, Philip replied, shuffling papers on his desk without making eye contact. It's about your attitude, your refusal to be a team player. I knew exactly what he was referring to. 2 days earlier, he had asked me to lie about his whereabouts during a crucial client dinner. He wanted me to tell Walter Goodwin, our biggest client, that Philip had been with me discussing strategy when he was actually at a hotel with Walter's wife, Christine. I had refused point blank. I told him I wouldn't compromise my integrity or risk the firm's relationship with our most important client. Philip's jaw had tightened when I said no, but I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Now, sitting in his office with a termination letter in my hands, I realized just how vindictive he could be. The letter cited failure to maintain professional standards and inability to work collaboratively. It was all corporate speak for refusing to cover up his affair. As I stared at Philip's smug expression, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. He thought he could destroy my career to protect his secrets. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The path that led to this moment had been building for months. Philip Barrett was a charismatic man in his early 40s, the kind of person who could charm his way into any room and make everyone feel like his best friend. When I first started working directly under him 5 years ago, I admired his confidence and business acumen. He seemed like someone who could teach me the finer points of client management and strategic consulting. What I didn't realize was that Philip's charm was a carefully constructed mask that hid his true nature. Over the years, I had watched him manipulate colleagues, take credit for other people's work, and bend the truth whenever it suited his purposes. I told myself that this was just the way business worked at the highest levels, that I needed to learn to navigate these gray areas if I wanted to succeed. The first red flag should have been his treatment of his wife, Margaret. She was a lovely woman who occasionally attended company events, always perfectly polished and gracious. But I noticed how Philip spoke about her when she wasn't around. The casual dismissiveness, the way he rolled his eyes when she called during work hours. He made jokes about being tied down and frequently stayed late at the office for client meetings that I knew weren't on his calendar. My relationship with Walter Goodwin had developed independently of Philip. Walter was a real estate mogul who had built an empire from nothing, and he valued honesty and straightforward communication above all else. When Philip first introduced us 3 years ago, Walter and I had clicked immediately. He appreciated my direct approach and my ability to cut through corporate nonsense to get to the heart of financial matters. "Jenna always tells me the truth," Walter often said during meetings. "That's why I trust her judgment." This trust had made me invaluable to the firm. Walter's company, Goodwin Properties, represented nearly 40% of our annual revenue. His projects were complex and lucrative, requiring careful financial modeling and strategic planning. Over time, Walter began requesting that I be present at all major meetings, and he often called me directly when he had questions about our proposals. Philip initially seemed pleased with my relationship with Walter, but I began to notice a shift in his attitude over the past year. He started making snide comments about my special relationship with our client, suggesting that I was overstepping my bounds. He began excluding me from certain meetings and tried to limit my direct contact with Walter. I thought this was just professional jealousy until I discovered the real reason behind Philip's behavior. 3 months ago, I accidentally walked in on him and Christine Goodwin in the conference room after hours. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers, and Christine quickly excused herself while Philip tried to play it off as a business discussion. That was when I realized that Philip's sudden interest in managing the Goodwin account personally had nothing to do with business strategy, and everything to do with his desire to continue his affair with Walter's wife. The breaking point came exactly 1 week before my termination. Philip had been growing increasingly reckless with his affair, and I found myself in the uncomfortable position of having to cover for his absences and mysterious meetings. He seemed to think that my loyalty to the firm meant I would automatically protect his secrets, no matter how dangerous they became. On that Tuesday afternoon, Walter called the office looking for Philip. He needed to discuss an urgent issue with a property acquisition that required immediate attention. Philip was supposed to be in the office, but I knew he was actually at the downtown Marriott with Christine because I had seen his calendar request for a private client meeting at a location that didn't match any of our actual clients. "Is Philip available?" Walter asked when I picked up the phone. "I need to go over these financing terms before the deadline tomorrow." I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. I could lie and say Philip was in another meeting, or I could tell Walter the truth and potentially expose the affair. Instead, I chose a middle path. "He's out of the office on a client matter," I said carefully. "But I can review the financing terms with you and have him call you first thing tomorrow morning." Walter seemed satisfied with this arrangement, and we spent an hour going over the complex details of the acquisition. I made detailed notes and promised to brief Philip as soon as he returned. When Philip finally came back to the office at 5 p.m., his hair slightly disheveled and his tie loosened, I could smell Christine's perfume on his jacket. "Walter needs to speak with you urgently about the Morrison property acquisition," I told him, handing over my notes. Philip's face went pale as he realized how close he had come to being caught. "What did you tell him?" That you were out on a client matter, I replied evenly. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating how much I knew, and how much of a threat I posed to his carefully constructed double life. Good, he said finally. That's exactly what you should have said. But I could see the suspicion in his eyes, the growing realization that I was no longer the naive analyst who would blindly follow his lead. 2 days later, he called me into his office and made his request explicit. If Walter asks where I was during the Henderson dinner tomorrow night, tell him I was with you working on the quarterly projections. The Henderson dinner was a major networking event that Philip was supposed to attend. Instead, I knew he planned to meet Christine at her friend's cabin outside the city while Walter was out of town on business. I won't lie for you, Philip, I said quietly, especially not to Walter. His expression hardened. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm telling you what's best for the firm. What's best for the firm is maintaining our integrity with our biggest client. That was the moment I sealed my fate, though I didn't realize it at the time. Philip's mask slipped completely, and I saw the cold calculation beneath his charming exterior. He had already decided that I was too dangerous to keep around, and my refusal to participate in his deception only confirmed his decision. Looking back, I should have seen the termination coming. But at the time, I thought my years of loyalty and my value to the firm would protect me. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was right about one crucial detail. Walter Goodwin valued honesty above all else, and he was about to learn just how dishonest his trusted consultant had been. The morning after my termination, I woke up in my downtown Portland apartment with a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the constant knot of anxiety in my stomach that had become my daily companion. Philip thought he had destroyed me, but he had actually set me free. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the Columbia River as I planned my next move. The termination letter sat in front of me, along with the box of personal items I had packed from my office. But hidden beneath my desk calendar and coffee mug was something Philip didn't know about. A USB drive containing copies of every email, calendar entry, and document that had crossed my desk in the past 6 months. As Walter Goodwin's primary point of contact, I had been copied on countless communications that Philip probably forgot existed. Travel receipts for hotel stays that coincided with Christine's spa weekends, calendar invites for strategy sessions that never appeared on any official client schedule, even expense reports for dinners at romantic restaurants that Walter certainly hadn't attended. I had started collecting this information 3 months ago, not because I planned to use it, but because I had a growing sense that Philip's recklessness would eventually catch up with him. My background in financial analysis had taught me to always maintain detailed records, and my instincts told me that Philip's affair was heading toward disaster. Now, as I scrolled through the files on my laptop, I began to see a pattern that was even more damaging than I had initially realized. Philip hadn't just been having an affair. He had been using company resources and client funds to facilitate his relationship with Christine. Hotel rooms charged to the Goodwin account. Expensive dinners billed as client entertainment. Even a weekend trip to Napa Valley that appeared on Walter's invoice as a strategic planning retreat. My phone buzzed with a text message from my friend and former colleague Lauren Hayes, who still worked at Velrick Consulting. Can't believe Philip fired you. Everyone's talking about it. He told the partners you had a breakdown and couldn't handle the pressure. Want to meet for lunch? I stared at the message, feeling my blood pressure rise. A breakdown. Philip was already spinning the narrative, painting me as an unstable employee who couldn't handle the demands of high-level consulting. He was protecting himself by destroying my professional reputation. I typed back quickly. Lunch sounds perfect. How about that new place on Burnside? 2 hours later, I sat across from Lauren at a trendy bistro, listening as she filled me in on the office dynamics since my departure. Philip called an all-hands meeting yesterday, Lauren said, picking at her salad. He said you had been struggling with personal issues and that your departure was for the best. Then he announced that he would be taking over all direct communication with Walter Goodwin. Did anyone question it? I asked. Lauren shook her head. You know how it is. Philip's a partner, and everyone's afraid to rock the boat. But I will say this. People are confused. You were one of the most stable people in the office. The breakdown story doesn't ring true. Because it's not true, I said quietly. Lauren leaned forward, lowering her voice. What really happened, Jenna? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to trust her. Lauren had been my closest friend at the firm, and I knew she had her own concerns about Philip's management style. Philip asked me to lie to Walter about his whereabouts, I said. He's having an affair with Christine Goodwin, and he wanted me to cover for him during client events. Lauren's eyes widened. Christine Goodwin? Walter's wife? The same, and it gets worse. I have evidence that Philip's been charging their dates to company accounts, billing Walter for his own cuckolding. Jesus, Lauren whispered. Do you have proof? I nodded. More than enough. The question is what to do with it. Lauren was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Then she looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You could destroy him, she said finally. Yes, I agreed. I could. That evening, I sat in my home office drafting the most important email of my career. I had spent hours organizing the evidence, creating a timeline that clearly showed the progression of Philip's affair and his misuse of company resources. The documentation was damning: hotel receipts, restaurant bills, travel expenses, and calendar entries that painted a clear picture of deception and fraud. But I knew that simply sending the evidence to Walter wouldn't be enough. I needed to be strategic about how I presented the information, and I needed to protect myself from any potential legal retaliation from Philip or the firm. I decided to structure the email as an anonymous tip from a concerned employee who had discovered irregularities in client billing. I would let the evidence speak for itself without making any direct accusations or revealing my identity as the source. The email began simply, Mr. Goodwin, I am writing to bring to your attention some concerning financial irregularities related to your account with Velric Consulting. As someone who values your business relationship with our firm, I believe you deserve to know how your funds have been utilized. I attached a detailed spreadsheet showing every questionable expense charged to the Goodwin account over the past 6 months. Hotel stays at the Marriott downtown during times when no legitimate business meetings were scheduled. Dinners for 2 at expensive restaurants when Walter was confirmed to be out of town. Even spa treatments and shopping expenses that had been creatively categorized as client entertainment. The second attachment was a timeline showing the correlation between these expenses and Christine's documented whereabouts, based on her social media posts and public appearances. The pattern was undeniable. Every romantic expense coincided with times when Christine was publicly absent from her usual activities. The final attachment was the most damaging. Copies of Philip's calendar entries showing private meetings and strategy sessions that corresponded exactly with the questionable expenses. I had included screenshots of his appointment descriptions, which were often vague or clearly fabricated. Before sending the email, I took one final precaution. I created a new email account using a public computer at the downtown library, ensuring that the message couldn't be traced back to me. I also made copies of all the evidence and stored them in a safety deposit box at my bank. At exactly 9 p.m. on Thursday evening, I sent the email to Walter's personal address, the one he had given me years ago for urgent matters that couldn't wait for normal business hours. Then I went home and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:15 a.m. the next morning, my phone rang. It was Lauren, and she sounded panicked. Jenna, you need to know what's happening here, she said in a rushed whisper. Walter showed up at 7 this morning with his lawyer and his accountant. They've been in the conference room with the partners for 2 hours. Philip looks like he's about to throw up. What's Walter saying? I asked, though I already knew. I don't know the details, but I heard raised voices. Walter was shouting something about betrayal and fraud. The partners have been scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with nervous energy. My plan was working, but I knew the real test would come in the next few hours. "Lauren, I need you to keep me updated," I said. "But be careful. Don't let anyone know you're talking to me." "Of course," she replied. "But Jenna, I have to ask, did you send Walter something?" I paused. Let's just say that the truth has a way of coming to light. After hanging up, I realized there was no going back now. I had set events in motion that would either vindicate me completely or destroy what remained of my professional reputation. But as I thought about Philip's smug expression when he fired me, I knew I had made the right choice. By noon that Friday, the situation at Velric Consulting had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Lauren called me every hour with updates, each more dramatic than the last. "Walter's not just angry," she reported during her lunch break. "He's talking about pulling all his business and filing criminal charges. The partners are in full panic mode." According to Lauren, Walter had arrived at the office that morning, armed with a full forensic analysis of the evidence I had provided. His accountant had cross-referenced every expense with legitimate business activities and found a pattern of systematic fraud spanning 6 months. "The numbers are staggering," Lauren whispered into the phone. "We're talking about over $50,000 in fraudulent charges. Philip used company credit cards to fund his entire affair." But the financial fraud was only part of Walter's fury. The personal betrayal cut even deeper. Walter had considered Philip a trusted friend and advisor, someone he had welcomed into his home and included in family gatherings. Learning that Philip had been sleeping with his wife while billing him for the privilege was a humiliation that went far beyond mere business misconduct. "Philip tried to deny everything at first," Lauren continued, "but Walter had copies of hotel security footage, credit card receipts, even Christine's confession from this morning. That detail surprised me. Christine confessed? Apparently, Walter confronted her last night after receiving the anonymous email. She broke down and admitted everything. She's been having an affair with Philip for 8 months. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction that the truth was finally out, sympathy for Walter's pain, and a grudging respect for Christine's decision to come clean rather than continue the deception. The afternoon brought even more dramatic developments. Lauren texted me at 3 p.m. "Emergency partners meeting. Philip's been suspended pending investigation." An hour later, "Walter's demanding Philip's immediate termination. Partners are trying to negotiate." By 5 p.m., the final blow had fallen. Lauren called me with the news I had been waiting for. "Philip's been fired," she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "Terminated for cause. No severance, no references, and the firm is considering legal action to recover the stolen funds." I sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the speed and completeness of Philip's downfall. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been a powerful partner at one of Portland's most prestigious consulting firms. Now he was unemployed, disgraced, and facing potential criminal charges. "There's more," Lauren added. "Walter specifically asked about you during the meeting. He wanted to know if you were available to return to the firm." My heart raced. "What did the partners say?" "They're terrified of losing Walter's business completely. He made it clear that your termination was one of the reasons he lost confidence in the firm's judgment. He said, and I quote, 'Jenna McAllister was the only person in this place who maintained professional standards.'" The irony was almost overwhelming. Philip had fired me to protect his secrets, but my termination had actually accelerated his downfall. By removing the one person who might have convinced him to end his affair quietly, Philip had ensured that his deception would eventually be exposed in the most damaging way possible. "Are they offering me my job back?" I asked. "Better than that," Lauren replied. "Walter's insisting that any future relationship with the firm must include your direct involvement in all his accounts. The partners are prepared to offer you a senior partnership track to keep him happy." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a sense of vindication that was almost overwhelming. Philip had tried to destroy my career, but instead, he had inadvertently positioned me for the biggest promotion of my professional life. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my revenge was complete. But more importantly, I had learned something valuable about the power of truth and the importance of maintaining my integrity, even when it seemed costly in the short term. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of a Portland autumn day, and I walked into the offices of Velrit Consulting for the first time in 5 days, feeling like a completely different person. The receptionist, Maria, looked up in surprise as I entered the marble-clad lobby. "Jenna, I heard you were... we didn't expect to see you back so soon," she stammered. "Change of plans," I replied with a smile that felt genuine for the first time in weeks. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me a moment to center myself. When the doors opened, I could see the entire office buzzing with nervous energy. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as I walked past, and I caught glimpses of hurried whispers and meaningful glances between colleagues. Lauren appeared at my elbow almost immediately. "The partners are waiting for you in the main conference room," she said, grinning broadly. "Walter's been here since 8 a.m. As we walked down the hallway, I noticed that Philip's corner office was dark, his nameplate already removed from the door. The speed of his erasure from the firm was almost breathtaking. "How are you feeling?" Lauren asked quietly. "Vindicated," I replied honestly, "and ready to get back to work." The conference room was packed with the firm's senior partners, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and desperate hope. Walter sat at the head of the table, looking older than I remembered, but with a determined set to his jaw that I recognized from our most challenging negotiations. He stood as I entered, extending his hand with a warmth that had been absent from our recent interactions. "Jenna," he said simply, "I owe you an apology and an explanation." "Neither is necessary, Mr. Goodwin," I replied. "I'm just glad the truth came out." "The truth," he repeated, shaking his head. "I trusted the wrong person and doubted the right one. That won't happen again." Managing partner Catherine Wells cleared her throat nervously. "Jenna, we'd like to discuss your return to the firm under new terms. Given the circumstances of your departure and Mr. Goodwin's specific requirements for future collaboration, we're prepared to offer you a position as Senior Vice President with a partnership track." I looked around the room at the faces of people who had stood by silently while Philip destroyed my reputation just days earlier. The irony of their sudden enthusiasm for my talents wasn't lost on me. "Before we discuss my return," I said calmly, "I'd like to understand what happened to Philip." Catherine's face tightened slightly. "Mr. Barrett's employment was terminated for cause on Friday afternoon. The firm is conducting a full audit of his client accounts and considering legal action to recover misappropriated funds." Walter leaned forward. "Philip stole from me, Jenna. Used my money to pay for hotels and dinners while he was sleeping with my wife. But worse than that, he destroyed my trust in this entire organization by firing the one person who could have prevented this disaster. I could see the pain behind his anger, the personal betrayal that went far beyond the financial fraud. Walter had built his business empire on relationships and trust, and Philip had violated both. "Christine and I are separated," Walter continued quietly. "She's moved out of the house and we're filing for divorce. But she did tell me something interesting before she left." He paused, studying my face carefully. "She said Philip was obsessed with getting you out of the picture. Apparently, he was convinced that you suspected the affair and were planning to expose him. He told her that firing you was a preemptive strike to protect their relationship." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Philip hadn't just fired me to cover his tracks. He had been actively paranoid about my potential threat to his affair. My professional competence and relationship with Walter had made me a target long before I had any real knowledge of his deception. "So, he created the very situation he was trying to avoid," I said. "Exactly," Walter replied with a grim smile. By firing you, he guaranteed that you would eventually discover his fraud and have every motivation to expose it. Philip always was too clever for his own good. Catherine jumped back into the conversation. Which brings us to your future with the firm. Walter has made it clear that any continued relationship between Goodwin Properties and Velrick Consulting must include your direct oversight of all accounts. I looked directly at Walter. And what exactly are you proposing? That you become my primary point of contact for all consulting services, he replied, with the authority to approve or reject any recommendations from other firm members. Essentially, you would be running a division focused entirely on my company's needs. The offer was more than generous. It was transformative. Philip had intended to destroy my career, but instead he had positioned me for the kind of advancement that normally took decades to achieve. As I looked around the conference room at the expectant faces of Portland's most powerful consultants, all waiting for my decision, I realized that my revenge was complete. Philip was disgraced and unemployed, while I was being offered his position and more. But the sweetest part of my victory wasn't the professional advancement. It was the knowledge that integrity and truth had ultimately prevailed over manipulation and deceit. I accept, I said simply, and watched as relief flooded through the room like a wave. The path forward stretched ahead of me, bright with possibility, and built on the solid foundation of trust I had spent years establishing with Walter and other clients. Philip had tried to destroy me, but instead, he had inadvertently set me free to reach heights I never could have imagined while working under his shadow. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. But in this case, living well meant stepping into the position that my tormentor had vacated in disgrace. As I shook hands with each partner and began planning my new role, I couldn't help but smile at the beautiful irony of it all. Looking back on this whole experience, I realized that standing up for my principles wasn't just about refusing to lie for Philip. It was about defining who I wanted to be in the world, and that choice ultimately shaped everything that followed.